Thanks. Good morning, everybody. So, can I ask everybody to stand up? Good morning exercise. There we go. Stick your finger in the ceiling and point to the ceiling, imagining that there's a clock right up there. And then start turning your finger from 12 to 3 to 6 to 9 to 12 to 3 to 6, pointing to the ceiling, right? And keep going in circles. 12 to 3 to 6 to 9, right? Circles, circles. What direction is our finger turning? Clockwise. Come on, guys, more energy, huh? Clockwise. Now, really slowly. Keep turning and start bringing your hand down. Can you keep going in circles? In circles. Keep bringing it down. The arm down. No, I mean down. Circles and down, right? Down, down, under your face now, around your stomach area, right? Now we take a look. And which direction is our finger turning now? Anti-clockwise. People in the back of the rooms can't. So we can stop turning. Before we sit, what do we learn? Perspective, exactly, perspective. So what I would like to do over the next 30 minutes with you guys, as you guys are here super excited about hacking and innovating and coming up with new stuff, is help provide a little bit of a different perspective on what innovation is really about and challenge your thinking and get you all fired up. We can all now sit down. So it's all about perspective. And essentially what I want to do is essentially help you guys reframe your thinking about what innovation is all about. Now, recent report has shown that essentially the lifespan of companies is dramatically shrinking. While companies in the 50s would live from 50, 60 years plus, today the lifespan of companies has shrunk to less than 2 decades. Many of the big names in all sorts of industries that existed a while ago just no longer exist because the pace of change has dramatically changed. And this is absolutely no different about the car industry. You know, these are some of the recent headlines that I went around capturing. You know, the end of car ownership and the impact of that will have for car makers. I mean, if I don't need to own a car, why do you need to make a car? Right? Or pushing it further, stuff like AI. You know, how is AI going to make its way into cars? A lot of companies are saying, hey, we're no longer a car or automaker. We're just a technology company on wheels. Right? And it really puts things into perspective about what we are trying to do. I was chatting with our friends in the corner there around machine learning or blockchain. What does that mean in securing transactions around auto parts, for example? Or I can keep clicking and clicking and clicking. Lots of change. Not just in technology, but also in the economic models that we are actually exploring. What is really cool, though, is while we get completely obsessed with the technology changes that are happening, what really matters is the impact the technology has on the way I, as a driver, use the vehicle, I, as a customer, want to use the car, or what I expect from a car maker like Audi, but also the changing consumption habits beyond it. What do I expect inside my car? You know, these small screens, it's just a no-go anymore. I need a big-ass screen like this, like I have at home or in the office. So the whole pattern is changing dramatically at speeds that we cannot control. And of course, as a result, you guys are trying to fight back. Call it innovation, transformation, Uberization, sorry, right? Whatever it is, it's fundamentally change. You are trying to change in order to deal with this change that is happening in the market. Customers, technology, consumption habits. And that's why all of you guys are here, I suspect. I walked around and looked at some of the titles of your projects. It's all around those kinds of topics. But while many people want change, so we all talk about it, very few are actually happy with how well we are changing. While 84% of executives believe change is important, only 6% are happy with how well they're doing. There is no business function, guys, in your company where the gap between what you want to do and what you're actually doing is this big. Imagine, actually, for the mathies in here, the gap is 92%. Huh? Imagine we miss sales by 92%. HR, supply chain objectives. I mean, it's game over, you know, we go home. And yet, somehow, for innovation, it's okay. And I would argue, essentially, that this change happens, that this gap happens, because we don't think. Companies have become unbelievably good at making stuff. And we really suck at thinking about stuff. Agile, lean, scrum boards, name it. It's all about make, A/B tests, make. Did anybody spend some time thinking about what the user wants? Why does he want it? Where? How? We don't think. And what I would like to get you thinking this morning is about the think. So, 3 things I want to help with this morning. 3 methods about you trying to become more customer-centric in that sense. First one, act like a child. So you guys are most probably thinking there, oh my God, but I'm a grown-up. Who's this guy telling me act like a child? I would argue that most innovations fail because we don't ask enough questions. And kids are amazing at asking questions. So this is a picture of me. What I wanted to notice is the finger raised. I was about 4 years old here with my mom. And you see the finger raised, ready to point at somebody. Who here has a 3 or 4-year-old at home? Who feels my pain? Question raised, always pointing at something. Let me put some data on the pain you feel at home and that you want to express to people. Your 4-year-olds at home are on average asking 390 questions a day. Right? So next time you tell somebody about it, you can bring some data. Now, the kind of questions they ask are really amazing. And here I have the questions the 4-year-olds asked, ranked by toughness by parents. They ask questions like, why is water wet? Where does the sky end? What are shadows made of? Now, if I do a timeout here, when was the last one anybody in this room asked a question that challenged the status quo like this about your work at Audi? Kids don't even accept that the water is wet. And essentially, the basic premise here is I, as a 4-year-old, I know nothing about the world around me, right? I'm just opening up my eyes to the world around me, so I keep asking questions in order to capture and understand what is going on. Now, we all can agree that the world around us is changing very rapidly, but we still talk about experts. We need learners, because the expertise you had based on your 20 years experience is worth nothing because the world changed in the meantime. And whatever you learn today is useless tomorrow. So we need more kids because they ask lots of questions. Now, essentially, that is why kids are called the R&D department of the human race. Because they are the ones who are moving us forward. They're the ones who are challenging the status quo. We people, we are completely useless. Adults. We don't contribute to humanity at all. And the problem with this is that by the time we are 18 years old, the number of questions drop by 80%. Newsweek did their cover recently on this. The creativity crisis just stops. Can you imagine how worse does it get by the time you hit 25, 30, 35, 40? Terrible. And so I also always wondered, why does it stop? Why does questioning stop? And essentially, it's pretty simple. Because when you go to school, your teacher wants what? Answers. Who got a good grade because they asked a lot of questions? Okay, very few minimums, right? I remember when I went to school in France, and I would ask a lot of questions. They would put me in the corner. They'd say, he's disrupting the curriculum. He's disrupting the classroom. And then if I kept asking questions, they'll call my parents. And then you go to your job, and your boss wants what? Solutions. Who got a bonus because they asked a lot of problems? They surfaced a lot of problems. Hey, boss, here, I have found 150 problems. Please clear your desk, get out of here. Right? Who got a bonus because they asked? Nobody. We want solutions. And in the context of innovation, we want ideas. And this is where everything goes wrong. We don't need ideas. We need user needs and insights. We need to understand what our customers want from us. Whatever it is that you're sitting at your desk building, forget what you're building. Figure out why you're building it. For whom are you building it? Otherwise, it will be another glory that you will keep on your desk forever. You will never be in a car, never in the hands of a user. Those are the real things that you need to start going for. And when you go, I mean, I heard that there was a design thinking team out here. When you go to the best practices of design thinking, to science, nowhere does it say that innovation starts with ideas. Innovation starts with defining the problem. Beautifully said by our friends at Google, fall in love with the problem, don't fall in love with the solution. And in that context, and just a point, this can be very counterintuitive, by the way. To us adults, it's very counterintuitive. Because essentially, what I'm telling you is, you think you know a lot of things, but today I ask you to go to the users and the customers and pretend or believe that you actually don't know. Ask them questions. I was recently with an insurance company who was telling me, Moody, but for 20 years we've been selling our expertise to the customer, and you want me to go to them today and say, I don't know? You tell me? Yes, that's exactly what I want you to do. So you got to go out there and open up those questions. Our friend Drucker said recently, the worst thing you can do is to start working on the wrong problem. Because if you have the right problem, through trial and error, you will find the right solution. But if you have the wrong problem, you're off base from the starting point. Like you're in the left field. You know, you're like playing ball in the next stadium. And that's what often happens. We don't spend time defining the problem. Now, when I was studying for my MBA at INSEAD, I had an amazing professor called Hal Gregerson. And Hal has this concept. He wrote a really great book, by the way, called Innovator's DNA. And in Innovator's DNA, he introduces this concept of 424, where essentially he says, over 24 hours, if you take 4 minutes to write down questions, it will change your life. So what I would like to do with you guys over the next 4 minutes is I would like you in teams to start writing down questions about the project you are here to work on. 4 minutes. Pens out. Let's go. Pens out. Write down questions. If you have problems writing down questions, call me. I'll come down and I'll give you a couple of questions. 4 minutes for questions. All right, pens down. We're done. Pens down, pens down, pens down. All right. Let me see. Team. I think Team 20 was doing really well. Where was Team 20? Team 20? Team 20. How many questions? 1. 1 question. Who says better? That's not difficult, huh? Who says better than 1? How much? 18 question. Who says better? Better than 18. Nobody? All right. I will come out, spend some time with you guys because you guys are onto some really, really great stuff. Thank you so much. So essentially, guys, what I wanted to hope to achieve through what we did is for you to kind of evacuate all the assumptions with which you came here and spend more time deepening your questions. If you take 4 minutes a day just to write down questions, you know, things about your job, but also about your personal life. I write questions down about all sorts of things. I just put them down, get them out of my head, and then start working on them. Now, you may think, oh, but questions, but how do I write a question? There is actually an anatomy to writing great questions. A great question starts with, how might we? Might. Not can, not will, not could, might. So that the horizon of what it is that you're trying to address is open. Because might can be anything. For a user, you need to know who you're doing this for. Are you doing this for the millennial driver who's going to buy their first Audi? Are you doing it for the super high executive who's had 10 Audis in their life? Are you doing it for a TT, for an A8? What are you doing it for? A car is not good enough. I'm sorry. Not in this world anymore. You need to push further. Action verb, of course. Accelerate, reduce, enhance, whatever. Given the key insights and user needs. And those insights and user needs need to be discovered. You need to go out there and find those out by asking good questions. This is how you write great questions. If you can write 18 questions like this a day, man, are you onto something cool. So that's the kind of behavior I want to see more. Now, so we talked about being kids, asking questions. Now, the second thing that I want to help with is actually innovation is a pretty much disciplined thing. Recent research shows that most innovations don't fail because of lack of creativity. I'm sure all you guys here are super creative. Innovation fails because of a lack of discipline. Because we think innovation is about pulling a rabbit out of a hat. We may think it's about magic. It's about systematic execution. And so the way we think about it is actually in books, right? They say, oh, you want to be good at innovation, you want to understand the science of innovation, around, stuff around design thinking, lean. Oh, well, you can go read 800-page books. I have personally never read a 800-page book about design thinking. I mean, I have better things to do in my life. And I suspect this is the case for all of you. So the real ambition is, how can we take that out and make it something that is consumable? Something like we have done for all the other processes in the company. Now, for everything else in our business, we have a best practice and a system supporting it, right? I don't come to Audi and start doing purchasing the way I like to do. There's a way, there's a best practice, and then there's a system that supports that process. We don't do business on pen and paper anymore. And yet, when it comes to innovation, we are back to markers and Post-its and whiteboards. Very interesting. I almost think we need to bring the axe out. It's so prehistoric. Right? And so what would it take to bring that kind of discipline? The way you should think about it is like a metro ride. Right? You know where you want to be, which is destination, and then you have essentially a number of steps inside the process in order to go forward. Typically, a lot of people completely forget the first step, which is the most important part, which is about defining the problem. They start with the second step, which is visioning, coming up with stuff where they don't really have a problem because they think it's a good idea to do it. They typically skip the third step, which is the prototyping part, which is why I'm very excited that you guys are here, because essentially that's what you're going to be doing. And then the last step is also very flimsy, because we don't really know how we want to monetize this, or how we're going to deliver it, or what does it really look like. But if you want real innovations, this is what you need to follow. You start with understanding what the user needs are. You define your problem. You come up with the first ideas, you reframe them, you look externally for inspiration. I don't care how big Audi or Volkswagen is, there are some really, really cool ideas outside your company. Before you try them out. And by trying out, I don't mean really expensive stuff. Trying out, I mean this. This is something, for example, the city of Amsterdam did in order to prototype parking bikes. You see the thing all the way on the right? Well, on your left, is actually Scotch tape, moving tape that people brought to the office, and they wanted to essentially figure out how can they define parking in the city. And you see even the guy who put the bike inside the square put it at the edge. Pretty cool. How much did it cost? Zilch. What was the MVP of that? This. Don't think sophisticated, complex, complete apps. Create clickable stuff. Draw on paper. What you want to focus on validating today is desirability. I'm very sorry to say this bluntly. Does anybody give a shit about what you're creating today? That's what matters. Not viability, feasibility, economics. You can make the most profitable thing. If nobody wants it, forget it. What you want to use your prototypes for is desirability, so that tomorrow you can take it to a user and put it in front of them and say, hey, if we had this, would it solve the problem you initially told me about? That's when you want to validate. Does somebody want this? The greatest companies out there were not created because they were viable. They were created because they were desirable. People wanted it. And I'm very specific on the word desire. I want people to fall in love with what you are creating. Not have to use it, not want to use it, love to use it. That's what you want to aim for. Make sure you build prototypes that tomorrow you can test. That's what is important. Great story about how this was applied. So this gentleman here, Doug Dietz, is head of a product for the MRI machines at GE Healthcare. Essentially, he makes products like this. Who has had an MRI here in their life? Quite a few people, right? Not a very pleasant experience. You go there, you lie on this thing, and then it goes forward. You're in this little tube, and it's pretty scary stuff, even for us adults. And one day, he was at the hospital, and he noticed that kids, when they come in to do an MRI, are shouting their brains out. It's havoc in the hospital. Parents are embarrassed, kids are crying, the staff is completely mobilized to figure out how they get the kid from the door into the MRI. They have to sedate them. It's hell on earth, right? And he thought to himself, hey, this is not what I wanted when we created this MRI machine. This is not the experience we wanted. And so they wanted to figure out how can they apply all this method that I talked about, this way of thinking, questioning, discipline, etc., to solving this problem. So they went out there and said, when does the crying start? Does it start at the door of the hospital, in the car in the morning? They went to people's houses the night before to see, hey, what is happening? Are you still crying at dinner time when tomorrow morning you have to do an MRI? How does it? And they went and explored, and they realized that the crying actually and the panic starts the moment the kid knows that he's going for an MRI. And what they started thinking is, okay, how can we solve this kind of problem? How can we change the entire experience that we're offering? And typically, as a healthcare company, which is actually very similar to a car company, the first thing you do is let's go change the product, because the product is scary. So let's spend €1 billion and come up with a new MRI machine. That's the kind of behavior we have. What they did was a bit different. They made this. Stickers. The product didn't change. So what happens now? They created something called Pirate Island. And essentially, as a kid, you get invited to a pirate adventure. So when your notice of an MRI is not some really scary letter from the hospital, it's actually a paper that rolls in as if the captain had sent it to you, right? And it's burnt on the sides and it looks really real, with a pirate hat that says, hey, on Friday in the morning, you're invited to come to this pirate experience at this place. And so kids are fully engaged in this pirate experience from the moment they get invited for the MRI. They come in, they go in, and then they lie on the thing. And you know when the MRI starts and it starts making these really, really big noises, they tell them, shh, stay quiet, otherwise Kids, straight like a mummy, right? And what is the last question kids ask when they leave the MRI? When can I go again? Absolutely. Right? So they bought a bunch of stickers and changed the entire experience. They did not touch the product one bit. And then after the success of that, they created this one, and then they created this one, and then they created this one. And this actually became a line of business for GE called GE Adventures in healthcare. So think about what would be Audi Adventures. What would that look like? Right? By understanding those problems and coming up with ingenious experiences. Now, so we talked about being kids. We talked about being disciplined. And last I want to talk about is measure. In any company, I'm not just a wacko. I understand that we got to deliver performance. In any company in the world, what gets measured gets done. Everything else, nobody cares about. And the problem with innovation is that it's part of everything else, because you can't measure it. Really measure the same we measure sales, product development, production, supply chain. We can't measure it. You start, and there's a big black hole until the moment you succeed. What happens in the middle? We don't know. So what we wanted to essentially think about is how can you actually break innovation down into measurable parts? So there are 3 things I want you guys to measure. First, I want you to measure performance and progress. So think of yourself, where are you in the process today? What have you accomplished based on that metro ride? And what remains to be done in the future? Try to measure things so that you can actually provide visibility to you and your teams, but also to other people about how you are performing. Second, what I want you to measure is team size. We'll talk about this in a second. And third is where and how are you innovating. So first, performing measurement at every step of the process. Having one insight from one user is not enough. I think that's pretty obvious. So start to create benchmarks for yourselves as to how many questions you need to ask, how many people, and how many user needs and insights you need. And start measuring yourself against it. Set goals at every step of the process. Like if you guys are here to prototype, how many prototypes do you want to create? How many variations? How many iterations? Set goals and measure. How many customers tomorrow you want to introduce this thing to validate it? It is very important to figure out where you are in the process and how are you performing. Benchmark yourself. 2, teams. Anybody here heard of the concept of 2 pizza teams? All right, you guys are all 2 pizza teams. That's the good news. So essentially, big teams don't outperform small teams. They actually perform less. Teams that are bigger than 3 to 7 people typically are completely crumbled by relationship management. What I'm saying is not that one extra person doesn't bring value to your project. They do. But at some point, adding one extra person is more expensive for the team to manage them than the value they bring. That's just pure math. Oops. And as you can see, that skyrockets at around 7 or 8 people. That's the cost to your team of collaboration. So I saw collaborate on all the t-shirts. Collaborate, yes, but collaborate well. Working with 50 people is not good collaboration. And last is the horizons of innovation. So as teams, when you're thinking about different topics, figure out where on the horizon are you. There is no one type of innovation. There are multiple types of innovation. Can I do core innovation? Am I doing disruptive innovation? And if you're using machine learning, it doesn't by default mean you're doing disruptive innovation, huh? Think about it. Is this for an existing user in an existing product? Or is this for a new user for a new product? If you're making planes tomorrow, yes, you're doing disruptive innovation. If you're putting some better, cool machine learning inside the Audi dashboard, then you're not. So be sober. And managing this horizon is very important. To figure out where you fit on this horizon so that when your company, your bosses, your team members ask you, you understand where you fit and what you're contributing to. Because they are managing innovation based on this. 70% of resources go into existing projects, right? How are we going to make our cars today, our offerings today, whatever it is that we make today, better, more efficient, more profitable, more desirable? Using blockchain in the trading of auto parts, aftermarket auto parts, is not transformational innovation. It's absolutely core business. Don't mix up cool technology with the horizon of innovation project. So figure out where you fit. And if you're managers, figure out how your teams are spread. I would love to see, for example, a spread between the 20 teams that are here, how they are spread across these 3 horizons. Because if you're not doing enough of number 1, meaning the horizon 1, the 70%, then we cannot pay salaries tomorrow. Because we're not making our current business more efficient. We're not going to be able to sell more cars next quarter. That is also important. And if we're not doing enough of Horizon 3, we're going to have a Kodak moment. We are doing great, and then we no longer exist. Like it happened to Kodak. So make sure you understand that. For companies who do this well, the rewards are astronomical. So this is a ranking of the most innovative companies in the world. And it just so happens that the number 1 is a car company. Compared to their peers, they get a market cap premium of almost double. And what does it make to say a company is innovative or not? Let me come back to it very clearly. First, they ask better questions. And what does that mean? It means that they understand, they are perceived by the market that they understand the future better than you. How do you understand the future? You ask questions. So while what I said can come across like fun and silly, it's actually very important. Do you understand the future better than your competitors? And the only way to understand the future is to ask questions, not to come up with ideas. So that's 1. 2, they are perceived to have the ability to execute on that enhanced understanding. I may understand the future better, but I don't know how to actually capitalize on the opportunities or challenges that I have identified. That's useless. So they have built in-house the discipline to execute towards it. And they are systematically measuring. And that is exactly the 3 things I wanted you to take away from this morning. Ask better questions, execute better, and then measure your progress. Coming back to thinking. Think harder. And I would leave you with this. A lot of people think about, oh, let's have some experts and stuff. But what I want you guys to be is learners. The world is changing. Experts are great for a world that no longer exists. The world of tomorrow belongs to the learners. So ask questions and keep learning. Thank you so much.